Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation is starting. Joe, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Maglita, and welcome to this Ziff Davis Enterprise eSeminar, your data center, your private cloud, sponsored by Microsoft and Fujitsu. If this is your first eSeminar, welcome, and if you've been with us before, welcome back. We always appreciate your time commitment. Moving your business to the cloud, as everybody is talking about these days, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to surrender all your precious IT assets to some vague place out there in the web stratosphere. Today's program, we're going to be asking the question, instead of going to the cloud, why not bring the cloud to you and to your data center? Experts from Microsoft and Fujitsu are going to talk today about how to deploy on-premise cloud and virtualization technologies that can help you deliver agility and lower costs right in your own data center. On the next hour, some of the things we'll be talking about in this general topic of turning your own data center into a private cloud include providing a secure, dynamic IT infrastructure, enabling delivery of IT as a service, something much talked about and increasingly done in many organizations, delivering rapid provisioning of IT services, accommodating pay-as-you-go IT, supporting self-serve IT services, a lot of interest in that as well, and also some great examples from leading companies around the world, companies actually doing this, from whom we can learn some best practices. So we'll meet our featured presenters in a moment. First, some quick housekeeping as always. This webcast, like others, is interactive, and the thing that makes it most interactive are your questions. So if at any point during the cast you'd like to ask one of our expert panelists a question, just use the Ask a Question feature located in your console. We'll spend the last 10 plus minutes or so at the end of the cast answering as many as we can. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we'll make sure that you get a prompt live email response from one or all of the presenters right after the cast. So ask away. This is a really new area, so we're all working our way through, so there's no such thing as a dumb question. So be heroically brave. Secondly, you'll find lots of good information in the presentations today. You can use the Download Slides button you'll see there on your interface to download a PDF copy of the presentations. There's lots of good material, lots of good conceptual overviews, and material that you can use to share with your team members and to refresh your own knowledge. Thirdly, we're going to pop up at a couple of different points during the cast today, a couple of different polls. That's a great way for you to get a reality check about what your peers are doing, and also to help the speakers customize their remarks to areas that you're most interested in or are grappling with. So to participate in those, all you have to do is click on the box and make sure that your pop-up blocker is turned off. And finally, when the webcast is done, a little survey window will pop up on your screen. It's a quality control measure. If you could take a moment to just fill that in and share your feedback with us, it keeps us on our toes and lets us know how we're doing bringing you high-quality webcast events. Okay, so that's all the preliminaries. Let's dive in because we've got lots to cover today. We'll have three guests joining us as presenters today and a couple of folks joining us at the back end to answer questions. So let's meet our presenters first. First up will be Carl Hillier. Carl is Director of Strategic Marketing for Infrastructure Services at Fujitsu America. We'll also be joined by Jeff Stucker. Jeff is Director of Solutions Development for the Microsoft Alliance at Fujitsu America. And finally, Manuel Martul, who is Senior Director of Product Marketing at Fujitsu America. Gentlemen, welcome and take it away.
Hello, thank you, Joe, for that introduction. This is Jeff Stucker, and as Joe mentioned, I'm the Director of Solutions Development with our Microsoft business in Fujitsu America. And today I'm sitting here with Carl Hillier. Carl is on the line as well.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And with Manuel Martul, who is part of our platform products team on the server side.
Hi, everyone.
So today we're going to be talking about cloud computing. It's a buzzword that you're seeing a lot of interaction on, and this presentation is no exception. So we are fully buzzword compliant here. But we're going to move quickly past what is cloud, but to what are the technology drivers and the business drivers behind cloud, and talk about some specific real-world scenarios today about how companies are getting the benefits of cloud computing and especially private cloud and virtualization, some of the technologies underlying cloud computing in their own data centers. And so today is going to be a very pragmatic a presentation on what are some of the business benefits of those key technologies that are making cloud computing such a powerful concept in the marketplace today. So to dive right in, there is a consensus emerging among analysts and among vendors about what are the components of cloud computing. And you can see some of those on the screen here. Cloud is essentially a delivery and consumption model. So it's both how you deliver technology and how you consume technology in new ways. And those attributes include pay-as-you-go, elastic and scalable, so it not only scales up, but you can scale down when you don't need the technology anymore. It's delivered on a standard platform through the Internet and includes some special capabilities such as self-service functionality. So you've got some standardized material that you can take advantage of, or standardized solutions and technical capabilities you can grow up and down as you need very flexibly in your business. And the biggest example of cloud computing is a public cloud scenario, and this is something that Fujitsu provides. Here's one example of a solution. It's called infrastructure as a service. So you can pay for server and networking power that would be hosted in a Fujitsu data center and that you can access when you need it. So in a virtualized environment, you can create server instances and pay for just those things you use, ramp up your size as needed, and ramp them back down. So if you have seasonal business needs that grow and shrink over time, or maybe you need a very flexible environment to do development and testing, you can consume just the servers you need to get through the use of technology that you need, and then you can shut them down. And it allows you to grow and shrink and scale very well. And it's on a trusted platform where the security is built into the infrastructure, and all those infrastructure problems are already solved for you. This is an example of a public cloud solution. And the technologies that enable these kinds of solutions that Fujitsu provides in infrastructure as a service are also available for you to use in your own data center. And we're going to be talking mostly about that. We're not going to be talking about the public cloud solution, which you can consume. And feel free to look to Fujitsu for those solutions. We do provide them. But today we're going to be talking about the private cloud solutions. And those private cloud solutions are going to be offered in 3 flavors. And we are delivering these solutions to our customers now in custom deployments where we provide a customized virtualized solution or a pre-configured solution, pre-architected and pre-configured. So you're buying an architected solution that's already been tested and already been certified, and then you're deploying it in your own data center. We also offer a hosted solution where you can have a private cloud that is hosted in a Fujitsu data center. And today we're going to be focusing on those first 2 areas. So it's on-premise, in your data center, you taking advantage of the technologies that are making cloud computing such a popular topic these days. So let's dive right in. Why are these things so popular right now? We've identified what we call the 6 C's. These are business drivers like consolidation, commoditization, collaboration, much more interactive technology is driving the market, consumerization, that same flexibility that you see in all the consumer applications out there, Facebook, social networking, and all of the consumer computing. People are expecting that level of flexibility and self-service capability even within the enterprise. Conservation, green IT, and compliance, having standardized security, and there's a lot of things to track to maintain compliance. And cloud computing, once that problem's solved for one customer or within even a large company, that problem can be solved everywhere. And those are the business drivers here that we see really driving the business. So as we look at these consolidations and business drivers, what are the technologies underlying those and enabling all of those 6 C's that we just spoke about? Fujitsu has, for quite some time now, had a data center optimization roadmap where we help you optimize your data center, and this optimization path enables you to transition your existing infrastructure to a more standardized infrastructure to begin automating many of your business processes and automating many of your IT management processes, adding technologies such as virtualization, which allow the flexibility and scalability. And you're really moving towards a dynamic infrastructure and cloud. And the diagram you see here is taken from our Trioli methodology. Fujitsu has a standard methodology that we are basing on our lean processes. These have been tested in our labs. It's very component-based, so based on those components which are enabled with our methodology, we can tailor these solutions very flexibly for both technical and business drivers in an optimized IT environment. And that optimization takes place through what we call sense and respond. It's flexibility and agility, where you can create a closed feedback loop on your business processes and optimize as you go and consistently improve. And that's what lean processes are all about. So let's look at what are some of the key enabling technologies under there. And one of them is virtualization. So Gartner has identified this path, and as you can see, there's some similarities between the methodology, Trioli, that we've offered for many years, and what Gartner just pushed out last week, this last month actually, in March, about optimization through virtualization and moving to a cloud infrastructure. And we're going to be talking about how you can take advantage of this pattern and this roadmap that includes things like server virtualization, distributed virtualization and management of systems, and going into a private cloud model. So let's take a time and see, based on this key technology, we'd like to learn more about the audience who is here on the call and put up a poll here.
Yes, good time to do that. Timing is impeccable. So let's do the first of 3 planned polls today. And in order to participate in this, as I mentioned, you need to turn off your pop-up blockers. And this is a pretty simple question. To what extent is your current infrastructure virtualized? Now let's say you here would be as far as you could see. So if you're primarily departmental, talk about your department. If you have more of an enterprise role, talk about your enterprise. So this is really from where you sit. What percentage are you? None, piloting, 0 to 25, 25, 50, 50, 75, 75 to 100. So we'll give you a moment to put your answers in. We will leave it to the computational gremlins in the background and pop those results back up for you in just a moment. Just as a reminder, this is a interactive exercise here, and as I mentioned, the thing that makes it most interactive are your questions. You're all interested enough to take an hour out of your day. We'd like to make that time as worthwhile as possible. So shoot in a question about some of the basic concepts as we get more deeply into some of the product-specific things. If you've got specific questions there, we can certainly take them. If they get really deep and down into the weeds, we'll put them offline and get you in touch with somebody who will be happy to talk to you at great length about that. But again, don't be shy, and you don't necessarily have to wait till the end either to send in your questions. Okay, I think I hear the computational elves have finished. Let's take a look at the numbers here. So to what extent is your current infrastructure virtualized? None at present, about 10% or so. Piloting, we have 0%. That's interesting. So if people are doing it, they're doing it. 0 to 25 is about a quarter of you. 25 to 50, about 30%. 50 to 75, pretty high, 26.5%. And 75 to 100, wow, 6.1%. Any surprises there? Jack?
This is fantastic. So what this tells us is that we've got a high adoption of virtualization already occurring. And so we'll focus the rest of this presentation on how to make the most of your virtualization efforts. And you might find interesting that we may discuss some scenarios that you haven't seen in virtualization yet. And so there may be opportunities for you to expand the usefulness and the reach of virtualization and the underlying technology that builds a private cloud as we proceed.
And for you other 10% who are doing none, this should inspire you because this will give you a nice view as to what's ahead and what's possible. So off we go.
Very good. So let's jump right into the various virtualization scenarios, which will be helpful for those of you who have adopted virtualization and those of you who are considering virtualization and making the best use of this. Carl, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot. So what was interesting about those poll results was the lack of people actually doing piloting, and I think that's quite telling in the sense that, as Joe mentioned, I think the benefits are not only very clear, but also can be realized very quickly. And if you look at the various virtualization scenarios, and we've actually got kind of two groups here, if you like, the four main ones are the ones that really have been a constant narrative throughout this eSeminar series. So from a testing and development standpoint, the ability to basically host your development environment and testing environment in a virtual world, giving you maximum flexibility. The longer term objective, which is ultimately to reduce the number of servers you need to buy and run. Also things like disaster recovery and business continuity planning, and getting you to that ultimate goal of a truly dynamic data center that can flex both up and down in response to business demand. One of the things that was interesting as we started to look at some of the scenarios, and we kind of went out and looked at what our customers were doing with virtualization, we found that there were actually a couple of other areas that really didn't fall into those above categories. So we talk about the management of distributed systems, the ability to extend the life of legacy configurations, and we're going to talk a little bit about the scenarios and where appropriate mention some specific examples of where these kinds of scenarios have reaped benefits for our customers. So let's look at the first one of these scenarios, testing and development. And this is probably one of the easiest to understand. So I would imagine that many of you, where you are developing applications and have done some virtualization, this is probably an area where you have, or if you haven't, certainly should look at deploying in a virtualized environment. Obviously, from a testing and development standpoint, you have the ability to what I call system multiplexing, the ability to take one server, make it look like many servers. Generally, the loads on those servers aren't particularly high, but they do need to be consistent and duplicates of one another, be sandboxes so I can go hammer away at a virtualized virtual machine, do things to it that it wasn't intended but not have it affect anything else. And also I can do things like HR and DR testing without requiring very complex configurations of multi-servers. And lastly, to have the ability to have a very flexible capacity. So during the life cycle of a project, I can change the configuration of my assets. So at the beginning of a project, I probably need lots of small development systems. As I get towards the project's end, I might start to need a slightly larger system to do either integration testing or indeed do performance testing on using real load scenarios.
So one of these scenarios you can see coming up is development consolidation. We helped a manufacturer who were doing testing and development and certification of their solutions, and they decided to go to a virtualized environment using Windows 2008 R2 with Hyper-V. And this enabled them to flexibly deploy their solution in that development environment for certification. And it also saved them lots of money. So they added flexibility. They reduced their electricity consumption. It reduced their costs of rolling out this testing and development environment, and it consolidated the number of servers they needed from 3 servers down to 1 server. That's just a small example of how development and testing can be enhanced through virtualization.
So with regards to the scenario we just described, which is really creating a development environment virtualized that gives you the flexibility to reorientate as and when needs require, that's a fairly transitory thing in the sense that there's a cycle associated with it. To take a slightly longer-term view, ultimately one of the chief benefits of virtualization is the ability to consolidate the number of servers, and you'll see that throughout as a narrative during this presentation, especially when it comes to the ROI side as well. By reducing the number of servers, obviously you're reducing the amount of capital expenditure because you're having to buy fewer servers, but you're also having to run fewer servers, and that's something that very often gets overlooked. Actually, the running costs of a server will very often exceed its purchase price during the lifetime of that server, which is anywhere between 3 and 5 years. So you're reducing the amount of power, the amount of cooling required, the management overhead, and also you're ensuring that those assets that you do have are optimally deployed in terms of making sure that those assets are utilized properly and that they're balanced appropriately with the workload that they're being asked to manage. Now, okay, how much benefit can you get in terms of how much consolidation can you see? Well, again, it's not a hard and fast rule here. It's going to depend very much on what specifically the servers are doing. But if you look at, and these numbers here are not theoretical numbers, they're actually based on the kinds of data center optimization engagements that we've done with our clients. So we see typically from a development standpoint, from a Windows development standpoint, you can see reductions in the amount of servers from about 16 to 1, which is very considerable. Reductions from an infrastructure standpoint, so here we're talking about file servers, print servers, and so forth, of about 6 to 1. Running Unix databases anywhere between about 2 to 1. And then lastly, business applications 1 to 1. Now 1 to 1 doesn't mean they can't be virtualized. It just means that you would run a virtual machine of a business application on perhaps a larger server, which might not necessarily sound ideal, but obviously you are getting economies of scale. If you can run 2 or 3 applications on a bigger server, you will very often save money in the long run as well. But these are some of the benefits that you can see, and obviously another benefit is things not just the cost of the server, but the running cost, the square footage it occupies, and the like.
As Carl mentioned, the power and cooling and management of a server, typically from our research, you pay as much as you paid for that initial server in managing that server over 2 to 3 years. And then after that, you're paying more than you paid for the actual server itself. So server consolidation can save you a lot of money. Fujitsu does a lot of business in retail. And one of the things that we've seen in retail is there are a lot of legacy systems that each of those applications came deployed and run on their own server. So when you've got store systems that are running in numerous locations, as in this customer example, with 500 retail stores, they had a number of different servers running, and there's a lot of management overhead. And so when they decided to refresh their point of sale, which Fujitsu offers, they also wanted to reduce their management overhead as well. So the solution that we brought to them was a solution that allowed them to consolidate the number of servers at each location from 6 servers to 2 locations, 6 servers to 2 servers per location. And that reduced the cost by $20,000 per store. It reduced their maintenance and overhead. It reduced their carbon footprint. And it also has given them centralized operations management. So the same tools, System Center and Hyper-V, that are used to virtualize this environment are used to manage the environment, which means now that they've got an infrastructure that is consolidated, it's also much more flexible to manage in going forward.
Okay, the next scenario we're going to talk about is business continuity and disaster recovery planning. And it would probably be inappropriate for us to kind of ignore the elephant in the room here as far as the events of the most recent weeks in Japan have certainly brought back to the fore people's thinking with regards to disaster recovery. It still amazes me that I talk to clients that really don't have much in the way of a disaster recovery plan. And I literally spoke to one customer a few months ago, and I said to them, "What's your plan if you were to lose your data center?" And there was a silence on the line, and the person said, "Pencil and paper." And that is really scary. It's scary for a lot of organizations. The whole point of obviously this kind of planning is to minimize downtime, and that's not just about disasters, but it's also about scheduled maintenance, backups. It can be natural disasters, can be malicious attacks, could be outages as a consequence of configuration problems or software conflicts. But virtualization certainly can help with regards to planning for these kinds of events.
One clear example of business continuity and disaster recovery is a solution that we rolled out for the University of Tokyo. And in this solution, we created a virtualized environment that enabled failover in the event of a physical server failure. So if a piece of hardware dies, the instances that are running on that hardware automatically move to a new instance. And so what that enables you to do is to have reduced downtime, quicker response in the event of an outage. And the nice thing about this is you can even set up remote backups and remote redundancy of hardware and software if needed in a virtualized scenario so that you can recover in the event of a larger failure as well.
So in a lot of cases, the goal here is to create a data center that is truly dynamic, the ability to keep pace with business demand, so as and when business demands change, that the agility of the resulting data center is able to then dramatically realign the assets within that data center to meet the demands du jour, and do so very quickly. It's about flexible resource control to basically get as much value out of the assets that you have, and also to do things that can significantly enhance the productivity of the data center in terms of making sure that, if I have to migrate from one platform to another, that I can do so and actually not have to bring any applications down, and do so through things like live migration, for example. So it's these kinds of features that really get you to the point where you have a data center that can resist some of the challenges that was just discussed when we're talking about disaster recovery and business continuity, to be dynamic enough to keep pace with the demands of business.
The next two examples are very good examples of dynamic data center being the key driver in the solution. Mitsui is a conglomerate based out of Japan that has many business lines, and they're supporting quite a wide range of businesses with a wide range of applications. And their virtualization initiative enabled them to consolidate from 1,000 servers down to 500 servers, and to standardize on a single architecture and a single stack that offers a lot more flexibility. But you can see in the quote here that their key driver is to meet changing business demands. It's not necessarily the cost savings, although those are great and can pay for the initiative itself, but the key benefits that they're seeing is a better use of IT to support their own business activities more flexibly. And similarly, Mammoth Sports Group in Austria was facing rapid sales growth, and they were on a trajectory where they were serious about doubling their sales. Well, in order to do that, they needed to make sure that their IT infrastructure was very responsive. And so that is why they made the key investment and went to Fujitsu, is to be able to prepare to grow the business and have that dynamic agility. So you can see the URLs in this presentation, and you can watch for a copy after this is done, and the URL for the prior case study on University of Tokyo as well, if you want to read the whole story behind these. And I forgot to advance to the next slide. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So as I mentioned before, we've had these four scenarios that really have been a permanent narrative throughout this series. But when we were looking at some of the other benefits that are associated with virtualization, we came up with a couple of other ones that customers were able to do things that really they wouldn't have been able to do as successfully without virtualization. And one of these is legacy configuration support. So many organizations have applications where the application itself they're quite happy with in terms of it does what it does, and perhaps the additional cost of upgrading or replacing that application isn't warranted in terms of the benefit realized. And what our customers have been able to do is to say, well, I really like the application that I have. I like the operating system it's running on. It does its job. But I'm not getting any benefits in terms of the automation and enhanced management capabilities. I'm also running it on antiquated servers that really need to be replaced. So what legacy configuration support allows you to do in a virtualized environment is to run those applications pretty much unchanged, running on the operating systems they're running on, but doing so inside a host machine that is benefiting from all of the enhancements as far as management is concerned, running on more modern servers that deliver much better reductions in terms of carbon footprint, reduced cooling costs, and overall running costs.
So the example of this is a large manufacturing company, a very conservative company with responsibility for some safety critical manufacturing as well, personal protective equipment and environmental and safety equipment were in their product line. And they had a lot of applications that were on legacy operating systems and on older technology. And they wanted to update their infrastructure and make it more efficient, and to increase the processing capability of all of their applications together. And so it really had them in this bind, because some of the technology that they're using they needed to take a more gradual approach and still get the benefits of a more modern infrastructure. So the solution that we brought to them was a solution where we virtualized their legacy operating systems, in this case Windows Server 2000, and virtualized that operating system and had it run inside Windows Server 2008 with Hyper-V and System Center. And what this enabled them to do was to modernize their technology, have a lower energy and carbon footprint. They're much more efficient. Their management overhead was reduced because they could become more efficient. And this gives them the flexibility which they were seeking to be able to now, over time, more flexibly migrate and modernize those solutions to all current technology while still maintaining the older technology on the older platform. And this is a great way to kind of unlock a customer environment where you're stuck in the past and really want to move to the future, and you can have one foot in both, so to speak, and get the benefits of a modern infrastructure and optimized IT much sooner.
The last scenario that we're going to talk about is distributed systems management. And here, of the examples that we had, really fell into two categories. One was where you had servers that were actually geographically distributed and then centrally administrated through System Center at the hub of the configuration. And then a second scenario where you had the servers and System Center being managed centrally, but they were then in turn communicating with devices or desktops that were actually distributed geographically. And the scenario Jeff's going to talk about is a particularly interesting one. Unfortunately, it's one that's in progress, so we can't give you as much information as we would like, but certainly keep an eye out for more information on this once this implementation progresses.
Yes, we talked about two examples of the server distributed management, the retail client with 500 locations and the manufacturing company with 120 different locations, where now their entire server infrastructure is managed through a virtualized environment and System Center. In this example, it adds to that distributed systems management story by having distributed devices management. So in this case, it's a multinational global brand, food and beverage company, who's really changing the market through self-service ordering and able to walk up to the devices where they're ordering what they want, and they can have their favorite goods at the ready. And these devices where they make these orders are kiosk-like devices with a touchscreen interface, running Windows embedded. And these devices are managed by System Center. And so the servers at the center that are managing all these distributed devices around the U.S. and North America, and which will eventually be running all over the globe, are managed by System Center at the center, which download all of the logs and keep track of any potential error conditions that need to be addressed, and also push out updates to all this distributed network of devices. And so in this case, virtualization and the tools underlying virtualization, namely System Center and the distributed management solution, is enhancing their ability to manage distributed devices as well as the distributed server examples that we talked about earlier.
That's going to be a neat, this is Joe jumping in, that's going to be a really neat case study when you can talk a little bit more about that. Love to see some detail on that. Let's take another moment to do a poll. Add a little texture here, and then we'll move on to the last segment of the presentations and then get in people's questions. If you've already sent in a question, thank you. We've got lots of good ones. We'll get to them, and if you haven't sent one in, there's still certainly time to do so. So poll number 2, same drill, fill in the dots, and you'll need to turn off your pop-up blockers. The question is, which of the following virtualization scenarios is the most compelling for your organization? And again, you can interpret your organization as your part of the world. We've talked about a bunch of these, but testing and development, server consolidation, business continuity and disaster recovery, dynamic data center, distributed systems management, or legacy configuration support. We'll take a second and pop those in, and we'll look at the results in a second. Carl mentioned earlier something I forgot to mention, so thank you. This webcast is part of an ongoing series that we're doing with Microsoft and Fujitsu, looking at various aspects of this virtualization and in particular prepackaged solutions and offerings. We're looking at how virtualization creates a foundation for private clouds, how that relates to hosted services, and helping you understand and pick out the best solution for where you're coming from in your organization. So if you haven't been able to join us for the earlier casts, you can go back to where you registered for this webcast at www.eseminarslive.com and pick up the last several there, and that really will be a nice complimentary offering for you. So let's take a look at the results. We need a little drum roll built in here, let's see. Testing and development, about 20%. Server consolidation, about the same. Business continuity and DR, slightly less, at just under 19. Dynamic data center, wow, that's pretty interesting. Almost 28%. People are moving up that stack pretty quickly. Distributed systems management, just about 7%, and legacy configuration support, just under 5%. So pretty interesting, and again, pretty evolved from some of the similar stats I've seen in the past. Carl, Jeff, any thoughts on these numbers?
Well, I think it's interesting that we've got so many looking at dynamic data center, but I think that's not surprising considering the number we had that had already done a substantial amount of virtualization already. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a point when you get to a certain critical mass of virtualization, and rather than being kind of individual virtualization solutions, you get to a point where now it's okay. This is part of it's a fundamental part of my IT landscape, and therefore you need to make sure that all the virtualization components are working together, so you get the benefit of the economies of scale rather than having little pockets of virtualization dotted throughout your infrastructure. And the fact that we're seeing people with different focuses, fairly evenly spread between certainly the four main scenarios. I'm not surprised to see more of those four than the bottom two. But it's interesting that there are people interested in those two as well. And of course, this is only reflecting people's most compelling. In all likelihood, we're seeing people that are doing more than one of those scenarios. It's not an either or. So I think this reinforces our view of people's usages of virtualization, and of course reinforces the point that it is a very important component of delivering agile IT infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Okay, let's press
Yes, thank you everybody for your feedback on that poll. That's very interesting.
And Joe, just one thing I did notice, I think on when I was looking at the attendees, there are some that arrived a little late. Not only are the first two seminars recorded, but obviously this one is being recorded as well.
Yes, so you don't need to miss anything. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We've talked about business benefits, and we have kind of dotted some of the case studies with some quantifiable business benefits. But I think one of the things worth bearing in mind here is that to really try and justify a virtualization effort, and it's not a trivial thing to think about, but certainly it's something where the benefits are fairly tangible, where you can actually make some pretty accurate predictions on the kinds of savings that you will make. And of course, there's obviously other savings that you'll get that aren't necessarily dollars and cents, but the ability to stand up a system much more quickly, to reorientate your architecture. Those kinds of opportunity costs are much harder to quantify, but nevertheless is important. One of the things that I did to try and give people a rough idea was to utilize an ROI calculator that Microsoft has and put in a very simple configuration where we had a total of about 92 servers, so a medium-sized enterprise that's got a scattering of file and print servers and other infrastructure servers, email servers, application servers, and web servers, and say, okay, if we were to virtualize that environment, what are some of the benefits that we would see? And we talked a little bit about some of the customers that we had earlier on, but if we took this 92 server configuration, that we would actually be able to reduce that down to 6 servers, so about a 15.3 consolidation ratio. So that's certainly at the upper end of some of the experiences that we've had within Fujitsu. If you look at that and you start thinking about, okay, well, what savings am I making, and the actual calculator generates a whole bunch of data about where the savings come from, what the assumptions are, and so forth. But the bottom line is that over a 3-year period, you would have a net saving of about $1 million. And in addition to that, as part of that, some of those savings are actually green IT. So if you're an organization that has a sustainability policy or a desire to reduce your carbon footprint, $325,000 out of that million are green IT savings. And by that I'm talking about the reduction of the square footage of the data center, reduced power and cooling consumption, and so forth. So there are some significant benefits that can be realized, and they're not just making things easier, but there are some tangible benefits from the standpoint of costs and the balance sheet, which obviously is something that most organizations are facing in the current economic climate. So with that, we've kind of been talking about the theory and some of the application of what some of our customers have been doing. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Manuel Martul, who's going to talk about, okay, well, assuming this is where you want to go, how do you get there? Manuel, over to you.
Thank you, Carl. So what I would like to do next on the following slide is to show you, if I may use an analogy, we're going to open the hood of the car, and we're going to look at the engine. In this case, this is an engine powered by Fujitsu and Microsoft. So in my opinion, this is the most exciting part. And let's have a look at some of the product and configuration examples on these self-contained environments. What we are looking at are agile and dynamic IT infrastructures, pre-tested, pre-integrated, and scalable. The thing that I would like to highlight here, when we talk about pre-integration of these environments, sometimes we see a lot of benefits, but you may see as you compare offerings with other vendors that you could get into some vendor lock-in. The degree of vendor lock-in varies substantially from vendor to vendor. What I would like to highlight from a strategy standpoint when we look at our implementations is we try to maximize the flexibility in terms of choice of virtualization, storage, network, servers. We try to partner with the best-in-class vendors that are out there in the market, try to deploy the best solutions for customers, and we try to integrate as much as we can into other vendors' environments. As much as I would like to see that you have a vendor lock-in, I think it is important to realize that the environments that a customer is running have multiple vendors, and you need to be able to utilize these concepts across multiple technologies, multiple vendors, multiple environments. So with that, what you see here in this slide are basically three approaches to private cloud. We're going to talk about the top two. We will show you some details on the Fujitsu Dynamic Infrastructures blocks and some of these pre-tested and fully integrated solutions. And then we'll also talk about the Microsoft Hyper-V Cloud Fast Track, which are the next few slides. So if you bear with me for a minute, we're going to move on to the next slide. And we're going to talk about Dynamic Infrastructures blocks. So what are Dynamic Infrastructures blocks? This is the Fujitsu term for, as we mentioned before, a set of agile and dynamic IT infrastructure blocks. So we talk about a solution that is mostly a horizontal, scalable data center infrastructure, and that is a perfect foundation for cloud. What we do on the top of what you see in this block in the diagram on the right, where you have the servers, the storage, the network, and then on the top of that you build your virtualization layer, and then you have your management and your resource orchestrator. So we also add on the top of that, obviously, the cloud-enabling software that will convert these environments into private clouds. Depending on your needs, obviously the size will vary, whether we talk about, let's say, a single system, a solution in a box, to, let's say, large deployments with a huge number of clusters or computing nodes. So at the end of the day, the DI block will be the combination of all these technologies, networking, storage, servers, the virtualization, the automation, in a prepackaged, pre-integrated, scalable, turnkey solution that will help meet the customer needs. What you see here on the next slide is basically an example on what we mean with this. So this will be a Microsoft Hyper-V Cloud Fast Track implementation. And this will help you deploy faster pre-configured environments that we're using. This is basically the DI blocks, so reference architectures. So it enables you to quickly provision virtual machines when you need them, to detect if there are any failures and adapt and overcome those scenarios, to have an open architecture that is easy to integrate, and then to have flexibility in terms of sizing. You can start small and then grow as your business grows. So in this case, this is a configuration that we've used with a Blade environment. So you have a BX900 Blade server. So this is our flag product from a Blade environment standpoint, where you're capable of running up to, let's say, 76 or 72 servers. And then on the top of that, you have storage attached to it. So in this case, this will be a Fujitsu Eternus DX storage device. We added some Brocade network switches and our management station. And on the top of that, obviously, your virtualization layer and your operating system and the orchestration and the services that will help you enable such an environment. That would be a large size. On the top of that, we provide obviously specific configurations tailored to your needs. We think this is also relatively unique from a vendor standpoint. So let's say, for instance, you have tested and certified a specific configuration from a hardware standpoint, and you want to make sure that as time goes by, you can default to that specific hardware configuration, because that's the way you have tested it and your applications have been optimized to run on that specific environment. So we could create a specific hardware configurations and freeze them in time that you could continue deploying through your life cycle without having to worry about new technology releases or components being obsoleted. So we can continue providing such an environment. And at the same time, if you have, let's say, a particular needs where you require specific memory configurations or additional disk drives, we can always look at these particular configurations and create them in what we call these made for you, these customized product versions. In addition to that as well, if lead time is critical and you would like to have such environments deployed to you on a, let's say, 3 to 5 day time frame window, we can create what we call the value for you, which would be these pre-configurations sitting already ready to ship in boxes, and whenever you just need one, you just place the order and it will just go out the door without having to be created, configured, and built. And then obviously at the end of the day, you could default to the standard way that you do configurations, which is basically just using a configuration tool and defaulting to the standard lead times. And then we talked about the Hyper-V Cloud Fast Track program. Obviously, the size we looked at before, this was a relatively large implementation with a Blade environment. Should you want to start with a smaller footprint, we have what we call a virtualization in a box. So this will be a self-contained environment for easy virtualization with Hyper-V. What you're looking at is a 1 unit or a 2 unit rack system in our, language within Fujitsu. This will be a Primergy RX 200 or a Primergy RX 300, preloaded, pre-configured with storage. We could also add additional external storage if it is needed. It enables you to support between 10 to 20 virtual machines. We can provide evaluation units, so if you just want to have this ready to go system, just feel free to contact us. We also combine them with additional services like Quick Start, so we could have a Fujitsu engineer just customizing and doing the final tweaks at your site so that once you turn it on, it just works within your environment.
Great. Thank you, Manuel. As we go on here, let's do one more poll, and then we'll look at the specific offerings, and then we will look at your questions. So if our producer could pop up the last poll, we will get your input about how ready you are and how interested you are to start moving along some of these paths. We won't flash these results, so these will be confidential to you. But which of these kinds of approaches would you be interested in? Fujitsu DI blocks made for you, Microsoft Fast Track, or a lone try and buy program? Take a second, answer those, and then we'll move on to our last action slide and into your excellent questions. Thank you, Manuel, and thank you, everybody, for responding. Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to quickly summarize, in terms of next steps, you can contact any of us. We were going to put up our contact information on the next slide around DI blocks. Those are standard infrastructure configurations across a wide variety of different configurations, including the made-for-you option where you can select a configuration and it comes ready to go out of the box. So you don't have to get a box full of cables to plug in. It's all pre-assembled down to the MAC address if you want. That's how much customization. It can really cut down the amount of time it takes to get new solutions deployed or extending a pre-configured, pre-architected solution. The Microsoft Fast Track program, which is a specific Microsoft certified variation of our DI blocks, where Microsoft has actually taken a look at this architecture and said this meets our Fast Track certification. And that will be right for some customers. For other customers, you may want more of a configured, customized solution. And our loan try and buy solution, where you can actually get your hands on some hardware and play it out yourself. So we really do look forward to working with you on each of these things. We're going to put up the next slide now, and you'll see our contact info there, and open it up for questions and answers.
Outstanding. Thank you, gentlemen. Lots of good stuff there, lots of things to think about. So let's dive in. And again, thanks if you've sent in a question so far. We'll get to those. If you haven't, you still have time. And if we don't get to your question live here on this webcast, we'll make sure, as I mentioned, that you get a prompt email response from one or more of our expert speakers today. So feel free to ask away. I'm going to start with a question that I hear from people, and you've covered this, but I know a bunch of people out there are thinking about it, so I'm going to ask it for those too shy to ask it. We've got a group here where a lot of people have done a lot of virtualization in their data center. It's a pretty advanced group compared to, I think, the population at large. When exactly does widespread data center virtualization become a private cloud? I mean, what needs to take place in order to get over that threshold?
Well, it's a very good question, and the fact that it is fuzzy, I think, is not a reflection of your lack of understanding. I think the market is still fairly ill-defined. There was a Gartner analyst who I spoke with a number of months ago, and he made this comment, and I'm always keen to attribute it rather than saying it's somewhat a great epiphany I had, but he made the comment and said, cloud, he said, it's probably misnamed. It should perhaps be called fog. And I think that's a very valid statement, because I think it is something that is still very nebulous. I think one thing you have to remember is cloud is more about the business delivery rather than any specific technology that distinguishes it from anything else. So an organization can have a significant amount of virtualization. I wouldn't necessarily be hung up on whether it's a cloud or not, or whether it meets a particular standard, but there are certain characteristics around cloud, and obviously one is things like chargeback and the ability to have a consumption-based price model. Jeff touched on this earlier in the presentation, but I think the point is well made that obviously if you're deploying hardware in your data center and you're buying that hardware, then there isn't really a consumption-based model from an IT department's perspective. But from a chargeback perspective, there may well be. And therefore, that's one characteristic. I mean, the ability to self-provision, so the ability to, take and say, I need to deploy a new virtual machine of this type. I want to be able to do that via a portal rather than having to, basically copy down and do a lot of manual configuration steps. So certainly when you get to that critical mass and you're looking to deliver a truly dynamic data center, you want the economies of scale, and therefore you definitely should be looking at things like provisioning portals, the ability to do chargeback so that those constituencies that are using the most are paying the most. And certainly those are definitely characteristics of a private cloud. But I think the key thing is that I wouldn't necessarily get hung up on whether it meets a defined criteria of being a cloud or not, and focus on, are you using the technology to deliver the business benefits that you need?
Brad has asked a question here. Thank you, Carl. Brad has asked a question that I'm sure, again, a lot of other people are asking, and is interested really in the process. So the question is, what would be the process Fujitsu would perform to assess the needs of a current setup and move it more toward a VM virtual machine kind of an approach?
Sure, I can say that one again. Yeah, we certainly do a lot of engagements. I mean, if you remember the slide where I talked about server consolidation and the kinds of results we saw in terms of the ratio consolidation compared to the type of servers and so forth. That's based on obviously a lot of engagements, and one of the things that our solutions organization does is create service offerings that are specific data center optimization or data center assessment that we can do, and we can also do cloud assessments as well. So these are service offerings that really are designed to come in and provide some recommendations and back those recommendations up with an underlying business model to say, okay, this is what we think you should do. This is what it will mean from a costing standpoint. So certainly that's a key component. I mean, if the offerings we're talking about today, there really are three principal components here, and they will have varying degrees of each component depending on the offering. But obviously we're talking about partly hardware, partly software, and then obviously there's a services component, and each offering is going to have different ratios of those three things. But certainly Fujitsu can provide specialist services offerings built on the Trioli methodology that Jeff was talking about earlier to help organizations that really, obviously we're talking to some organizations that already got some virtualization, so you may have some, but you want validation that you're doing it the right way or looking to do more. Some that perhaps, that 10% or so that don't have any virtualization, that really are kind of intimidated by it all and want to make sure that they get the benefits as quickly as possible in the best possible way and leverage best practices, and we as an organization are happy to help clients with that.
We're joined in this Q&A session by Scott Rosenblum, who is a technical specialist for Microsoft. Scott, welcome.
Thanks.
I've got a couple of questions here for you, Scott, so let's get you into the mix.
Okay.
A couple of people have mentioned, and we mentioned several times during the cast here, this ROI calculator that can be helpful in all this. Where do people find that?
Yeah, so what I can do is include a URL on the email responding to this webcast and point you to that. And I'd also point out we have a complementary tool called the map tool, assessment tool that we also provide, which allows you to sort of discover existing physical servers out there and look at the performance of those systems and be able to import that into the ROI tool to actually look at your existing infrastructure and have an idea of how that might fit into a virtualized environment.
Neat. And just so folks listening understand, the letter that Scott mentioned is we'll just send a brief thank you email in the next couple of days with some other resources to help you along in your journey, and that the links to that ROI calculator will be in there as well. So there'll be some good stuff to keep your thought process moving. Thank you, Scott. Just a follow-up question while I have you. Hermanshu, he asks, when it comes to legacy, what are the OS platforms that are supported when trying to virtualize them?
So obviously we have many flavors of Windows Server that we support, as well as Windows Client. So for VDI type of scenarios as well, and then we also support Red Hat Linux and as well as SUSE Linux, and we have what's called for the Linux folks out there, we have integration components that we provided to the Linux kernel. So depending on which kernel you pick up, those are actually already embedded in there. And what those allow you to do is get the SMP support, so you get multi-core support, and then also the ability for what we call synthetic drivers, so getting the high-performance network and disk access as well.
Excellent. I just want to share a comment here that's come in that goes back to what we were just talking about the still emerging definition of cloud and private cloud and where does one become the other. Ronald from HP brings up an interesting point here, too, that his take is that cloud should be left to services consumed over the Internet, so probably what we would think more about as a public cloud. Private cloud should be not called that at all, but rather dynamic data centers or something like that. An interesting thought. Put into your mix as you think about this. Jeff Stucker, I have a question here for you. To me, when I look at the packages that you've got here, I mean, these pre-packaged, pre-configured approaches, some of these things like the DI blocks, seem very attractive. I mean, they do a lot of the bundling, the certification, the testing. It seems like there's a lot of very common sense benefit that can be gained from these. Do you typically, when folks go that route, how do you quantify the benefits of those kind of pre-configured approaches for them? Do they or you typically walk through some kind of ROI scenario, or is it just so obvious that you're going to save so much time rolling these things out, setting these servers up, that you don't technically need to go into that kind of detail?
Well, absolutely. And the ROI analysis assumes that you are moving towards a prepackaged, pre-configured approach.
Okay.
And that's where you get a lot of your cost savings from a management perspective by doing that. So if you look at our Trioli approach, or even if you look at the Microsoft infrastructure optimization model, Microsoft has published some core infrastructure optimization numbers, which align very, very closely with what we've seen, that those benefits really come into play when you standardized your configuration. And so if you're not using some kind of a prepackaged, pre-configured solution for consistency, you're not going to see the full benefits of an optimized data center, simply because you end up doing too much stuff one-off rather than using a standardized, repeatable process and technology.
Mm-hmm. Hard to believe, but we've run through another great hour of information and exploration. I want to thank all of our guests, Carl Hillier, Jeff Stucker, and Manuel Martel from Fujitsu America, and also Scott Rosenblum from Microsoft, and especially all of you who joined us. We know everybody's busy. We hope this has added to your score of knowledge and has moved you along in your discernment in all this. You can download the presentations, as I mentioned, from the console here. A recorded version of this cast will be available within the next 24 hours, and it will be posted for the next 6 months. So if you want to go back and pick up an extra point, refresh your memory, or share with some team members, feel free to do that, and to check back with the other casts in this series. For information on upcoming eSeminars, you can go to eseminarslive.com, and there's a whole bunch of good topics by a whole bunch of interesting people. The audio portion of this cast will now come to an end. I'm Joe Maglita for Ziff Davis and our sponsors, saying thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of the day.